Agentic AI sounds exciting until you try and run it through your legacy stack. The approvals take weeks, the forecasts don't match, and no one trusts the data. And that makes AI useless. Dan Wiseman knows this better than most. He's rebuilding the data foundation inside Barry Callebaut, one of the world's largest chocolate ingredient manufacturers, because he knows some things that most execs don't. What good is agentic AI if your forecasts still live in Excel? In this episode, Dan breaks down why most enterprises are sleepwalking into AI failure, how to eliminate bottlenecks before they cripple transformation, and the one thing he'd erase from enterprise culture tomorrow.
You don't need moonshots to move the P&L, but you do need...
Hey everyone, welcome to a brand new episode of Reimagined with AI, brought to you by Signoffs. I'm your host, Imteaz, and I help executive leaders create value with the smartest minds in artificial intelligence. You may not realize it, but behind every major innovation in retail, media, and technology, there's a team wrestling with how to make AI real and valuable inside massively complicated matrixed organizations. On this show, I sit down with the business and technology leaders who are doing exactly that. Reimagined AI explores how today's most forward-thinking enterprises are using data, AI, and automation to transform how they operate and how they grow. Because it's not just about adopting new tools, it's about reimagining what's possible. Let's get into it. Welcome to the show, everyone. This is Reimagined with AI with Imteaz. I have the pleasure of having Dan Wiseman from Barry Callebaut Group with me today. Barry Callebaut is a world leader in ingredients manufacturing within the chocolate vertical. So pleasure to have you on the show today, Dan.
Well, thank you for having me. Really happy to be here.
So, Dan, you're the Chief Data Analytics Officer at one of the leading ingredients manufacturers in the world, working in the analytics space with your broad experience. You know, when you look at the CPG space in 2025, which was the end of it now, where will AI actually move the P&L and when it comes to revenue, margin, or working capital? And what do you think leaders must do to really unlock that value?
Okay, what AI might feel is new, but technology's been around for a long time, and technology forever has tended to improve margins first. Optimization tends to have that quicker impact, and AI sometimes feels like the modern equivalent of the gold rush era. But it was only back in the summer the MIT study came out to highlight 95% of GenAI pilots fail. Now, we can contest the numbers and argue around that, but it is a wake-up call because you don't need moonshots to move the P&L with margin. Although, of course, with AI, you can certainly help boost it with things like dynamic pricing, with what-if scenarios, and these are all things that we're currently looking at the moment. But I think the key thing is that margin is probably the easier one to run after and get that quicker value.
So diving deeper into that, I think, you know, everyone's had this expectation that AI is just fundamentally going to change everything that we do within the manufacturing space or within the CPG space. But fundamentally, the way this industry has gone to market since the 80s, late 90s, hasn't really changed since that time. If you look at the supply chain infrastructure, so many people still on mainframe, so many people still on JDE with the DOS screen, right? So it's not to say that AI can't change all of these things, but fundamentally to make those radical shifts that I think the market and investors are looking for, that's going to require huge change. And a huge change comes with complexity and cost. And in terms of, identifying that incremental change, in terms of, identifying what can we, and when you're at like a $1 billion scale, changing a percentage point or two here and there, does have an enormous impact on margins, but that doesn't fundamentally change how we go to market. So, if you think about strategic bets, what would you think similar sorts of enterprise companies should overfund in the next, 12 months? And where would you kind of, hold back investment when it comes to thinking about unlocking efficiency and or margin gains out of tech investments, specifically within this AI space?
Yeah, and you mentioned there that although some of the new technologies may be newer, actually the fundamentals don't change, and you can never overfund end-to-end data, but you can waste a lot of money on big, shiny technology. And in a market like cocoa, where we're still seeing unprecedented volatility in cocoa prices, the biggest value lever is visibility. So knowing what's happening from the farm all the way to the factory, then all the way to the customer. And what Barry Callebaut found, as with everyone in the cocoa industry, is that when your largest commodity is stable for decades, all departments, how things operate, people can do their own thing and it's fine. You'll buy beans, you'll make them into something, you'll sell them just fine. When it surges by 50% and stays there for 18 months plus, knowing all the interactions and trade-offs across the value chain now becomes an absolute must. So really investing in the data and really investing in the end-to-end visibility, I think is hugely important. And then when you do that, putting AI on top it is then going to be that much more valuable as well. In terms of what to avoid then, you can waste a lot of money on technology, and everything is still moving so quickly. So I would really try to avoid any big monolithic technology investments, any massive sort of platform purchases, anything that's not really modular or flexible, that it gives you that agility, and really stop trying to search for that one magic technology bullet. Investing in the basics, in the fundamentals, investing in data, and not on the big monolithic technology, despite what the sort of adverts and consultants may say.
In an ingredient-based, B2B versus branded CPG world, what growth levers really change in this space, and what principles essentially stay unchanged?
Yeah, well, I think having worked in both, neither anymore just about having the best products anymore. Everyone's got great products. What it comes with is that value add. And in B2B, growth now depends on co-innovation with customers, whilst CPG is much more on personalization. And in B2B, it's all now about winning with solutions with customers. So working with them to help find the right textures or formulations or the shelf life they're looking for or sustainability targets that they're going after. Whereas in branded CPG, you're still winning by mastering that consumer attention. So although there might be some differences, it's still both really data-led, and you're still winning both by using the technology in terms of being able to get into the specifics, whether it's personalizing the sort of the flavor profiles or the attributes of the ingredients, or whether it's around the personalization preferences of the consumer. It's using the technology to drive those and to drive that faster, smarter, cheaper.
So, in a environment where volatility reigns supreme, having all of these data points across that value chain, from the farms to, to the shelf, and then co-creation of innovation with all of the partners that you have within the ecosystem, it leads down the path of how do I, as a leader, connect all the dots from a data point of view and create that value. So within, from an internal perspective, what does, that internal CIO, CMO, CFO operating rhythm need to look like when you have AI in the loop? You have, customers who are wanting to do more with the data that they have. What are those decisions, cadences, and how do you kind of operate internally to maximize this opportunity that you have?
Yeah, great question. And I'm not sure the operating rhythm in the world of AI has been perfected just yet. But considering that most problems that we're really trying to solve these days are complex and they're end-to-end, I think the key principles, because you mentioned the CIO, the CMO, and the CFO, and I think the key principles around regular syncs, and it's all about shared inputs and clear ownership between them. These people need to charter unknown waters together. And the CIO really needs to have that strong ownership on the platforms and the technologies, the CMO on activation, and the CFO on the value realization, coming back to that ROI, making sure that the investments are showing the value. And I think there's also the shared responsibility. So sharing responsibility for things like the data quality. So coming back to the fundamentals, are the fundamentals in place? And then also having the shared responsibility of what are the outputs of the model. So when we're using AI in the loop, how are we sort of checking for that? How do we have that trust in the decisioning there? So I think AI over complex value chains is only as good as the leaders working within a system.
So if you had to simplify the org to move faster, what would you kind of remove? Like the metrics, the meetings, or approvals, and why? Like, how do you, this new technology is enabling speed, but we still have so many humans in the process. How do you kind of remove the friction to getting to decisions faster?
So I get to choose one to remove. It's funny because in the UK there's a game show where celebrities can banish things into Room 101 from Orwell's 1984. So I'll give that one a go. Um, for me, multi-layer approvals, they tend to reflect legacy control. And dare I say, for me, it's more of a comfort blanket rather than real control. So I do think that one you can replace with guardrails. You can replace with automated checks, trying to sort of move from permission to prevention. Meetings can always be streamlined into specific heartbeat ceremonies. You can always make them more focused and streamline who's doing what. Without metrics, you can't see what you're moving towards. So AI might be moving you faster towards something, but you want to know where you're moving towards before you go there too quickly. So if I get my Room 101 choice, I'd like to consign maybe the multi-layered approvals to Room 101, please.
It's interesting you say that because there are so many existing processes within enterprise companies that make no sense. When you like, if you were to run your own business, you're like, why do three people need to approve a $1,000 invoice, or very simple things like that, like where you can have just machine learning models essentially going in and doing very basic checks for you and running a risk analysis for you on those things. Yes, it's a fundamental shift in process for an enterprise to adopt something like this, but the amount of savings that you get in productivity is absolutely wild. So, from a data to decisions point of view, what's the minimum single source of truth that an executive team needs to steer its marketing, its trade, and supply teams to give it that confidence?
Yeah, so I think it's really important, first of all, that everyone is on one page. So they see the same demand, they see the same inventory numbers, and they also see the same margin. And that almost sounds obvious, but on too many occasions in my career, particularly around consumer goods and manufacturing, I find myself in one meeting and there'll be the salesperson and they're sharing the forecast numbers and they've got all the certainty and confidence in the world. And so I fully am behind them in terms of what they're talking, only to go to another meeting with the planners and we're looking at a different forecast number. And these are even within systems, right? So it's not only the functions, it's not only the processes, it's in the tools themselves as well. So I think a great starting point is everyone using the same number, the planners, the sales team, finance. Things like integrated demand planning, that's nice. Having inventory supply planning at SKU level, that's even nicer. But I think just coming away from trying to give executives the best dashboards and just focusing on those aligned demand, inventory, and margin numbers, that everybody has got that single source of truth, I think is the key thing.
I before becoming a consultant, I worked at one company for the entirety of my career, and that company was extremely focused on data organization of data and ensuring that people would look at the same thing across different functions, and everyone was tied to the net revenue delivery at the end of the year. Moving into a consulting world and working across different CPGs, it's chaos. Like what you just said, I was like amazed at how many big companies don't have data organized, how many executive leaders don't have confidence in their business unit P&L. And that, growing up in a company that was very militant on having P&L visibility from a graduate level all the way to, exec team. That was just wild to me. Now, it to make AI and to make all of this stuff have value, the data needs to be organized in a way that it can actually process this stuff and to actually make it make value. And I don't feel like a lot of companies are investing in that organizational readiness / they haven't got their ducks in a row or data silos connected together in a way to make all of these things actually work together. So which 2 to 3 signals do you think consistently predict real demand regardless of channels? And which popular metrics do you think deserve less attention when it comes to, organizing your data?
Yeah, and we've been looking at some of these signals over the last 12 months or so at Barry Callebaut, and when we look at things like social likes and impressions, I think the conclusion is that they can often distract more than they can inform. And when we did a proof of concepts, trying to democratize giving people tools and technology on top of social listening, what we found is it's really challenging to get the accuracy high enough, how to actually look at the variance across users, and there's an awful lot of noise to signal ratio. So that was a nice learning. And I think what I still find is using industry trends and volumes that we've been using for decades, right? Although getting access to that, what we can do with the data might get a little bit more sophisticated, but I still think those signals on who is selling what is up, what is down, I think it's still a really reliable signal. I think as well, weather anomalies for seasonal products like ice cream, because being an ingredients business, it's not just chocolate, it's chocolate products and other things, but I think weather anomalies and tracking is also tried and tested in terms of having that impact on demand. I do think it depends on whether you're trying to create new markets or unique solutions, in which case you do need to maybe take more risk on some of those signals versus where you're just trying to be where the market is and trying to work within there, in which case going through things like industry trends and volumes, I think is still really, really useful information.
Shifting gears a little bit into this topic that everyone's been wanting to, sink their teeth into and create careers from, agentic AI. There's so much buzz. There's so much FOMO. Do you feel that most enterprises are actually ready for an agentic AI? Do they really have their house in order to create value from this? And what do you think that needs to be done at the enterprise level in the next, let's say, 12 months to actually get ready for it?
Well, if I may, most companies are probably barely ready for regular AI, right? You mentioned the data and silos and all these challenges, and so agentic AI is only going to make that more so. I think there's always been a rush to the newest technologies on the hype cycle. Agentic AI is amongst the leading ones in 2025, but there's also plenty of overlapping tools out there already: low code, no code, RPA, macros, many more. And I think we've seen repeatedly a rush to these technologies without fixing the architecture or fixing the workflows or fixing that data that we talked about. It just adds technical debt and also more operational issues. I mean, for those that have implemented things like RPAs and low code, no code, you know that when workflows change or something changes on the web page, the whole thing falls over and you just get more operational issues. So at Barry Callebaut, over the next 12 months, what we're focusing on is we're mapping processes, we're trying to clean the data foundations, and we're trying to just focus on 1 or 2 domains where we think agents might make sense. So customer domain, colleague domain. We try to crawl before we walk, before we can run. Now, it might be slower to get those LinkedIn headlines and talk about all the great agentic AI that we're doing, but it is quicker, at least in my belief, it is quicker to realize real value in the long term. So we don't want to deploy agents in messy systems. It's only going to amplify the mess that we drop them into. So I think it still comes to, let's get the fundamentals right. Let's try things in a smaller way, and then we can grow from there.
So Dan, you just mentioned technical debt. What does good technical debt look like in the age of data and AI? And what debt actually strangles speed?
Well, as a recovering ex-chief architect, I question whether there's such a good thing as a good technical debt. But if I use the principle that good debt buys you learning and bad debt buys lock-in, then good debt is all about smaller, more modular, so lightweight proof of concepts, thin slices of scope that you can test value fast, maybe things like APIs. Um, and at Barry Callebaut, a key thing for me is we make sure we're able to turn off proof of concepts if the value's not there. I think in my career, I've seen it too easy to fall into that trap of never being able to switch things off. But bad debt for me is more where you're spending a lot of money, anything that's hard coded or bespoke systems. And again, where you don't have the agreement up front, you can switch things off when they're not working, or at least showing you that value that we talked about before. So low cost, low effort, low regrets is always going to be better than trying to build some perfect thing for scale.
Amazing. I think Amazon refers to this particular thing as two-way door decisions versus one-way door decisions, right? So what are the things that can be easily changed when we make a decision when it comes to like a platform choice or a new service provider versus something that we can we're essentially married to for a very long time and very hard to essentially change. Now, from a risk, trust, and governance point of view, what do you think is the right posture on data and AI governance? Everybody wants to move fast with tight guardrails versus moving deliberately with more broader consensus. What advice would you give there?
Yeah, so a little bit as we were talking on that sort of last piece is that start fast with a limited tight guardrails, and that will give you time to scale slower with broader governance. Early wins create momentum, and I think momentum is really important. And every legacy company battles with, on one hand, having to fix the engine room of all the stuff that's been built and delivered over decades, whilst trying to compete in this whole new world of fast-paced change and AI and agents and everything else. I like the concept of creating lighthouses on the innovation side. So whilst one part of the team are getting the basics right, you have another part that's trying to create, whether it's new insights or new data products that can shine the light and actually bring people in. And having done this in multiple companies now, it's much more effective than any PowerPoint deck or any white paper that you can do to actually show, don't tell. And then you can expand governance models as the risks or as the adoptions grow. So you do it just in time. So build momentum first and then earn the right to mature and scale.
So my next question is, from an M&A point of view, where do you think, especially when it comes to all these new capabilities, one of the things I've seen actually work and not work, it goes both ways, is when you buy a smaller company that has these new capabilities with the purpose of integrating that capability into your own company, specifically if they're in the same vertical as you are. So I've been in instances where big company buys smaller company, but smaller company had a more later or a more updated version of SAP, and then big company adopts new company's SAP instance and then does the transformation through new company, right? Similarly, with all of these new capabilities coming out through with AI, do you think M&A could be a strategy to accelerate the adoption process of process change within particular industry verticals?
If we continue the theme that AI is just another tool, it's a very good tool, but it's just another tool, then I think for sure, yes, I think the whole world of M&A where if you do have a clear strategy in terms of what you miss or what you can benefit, then it would make sense for AI as with any other area. And I do think in the evolving world of AI, there's always that choice of buy versus build. And in where you can find the commodity, do the commodity, build on open source models, do what you want. In other areas where you might want to differentiate, but if you are a food-based company, in the case of Barry Callebaut, you're not going to be able to put the same billions in that the tech giants are putting in, and therefore being able to do M&A in the areas specific to where you think you might be able to win, I think can be valuable. I also think partnerships are probably another sort of in-between element as well. So build versus buy, but also partnerships as well of trying to get more native AI companies to help you with your particular journeys and your particular areas that you're trying to win in the market with.
So from a headcount point of view, if you can't add headcount to your team, which 3 capabilities would you upskill to change outcomes in the next 6 to 12 months?
Yeah, so at the moment with my team, there are 3 capabilities that we are focusing on. It's data storytelling, it's prompt engineering, and it's domain knowledge. Storytelling, because I do think that's the secret sauce that converts data into insights, into decisions. And AI and digital, it's still people first. We have to be able to emotionally connect people with data. And therefore, I think that's a really key skill for any data and analytics team to have. We just had the top 200 leaders together in Belgium a month or 2 ago for Barry Callebaut, and we were able, through data storytelling, we were able to actually show people what AI and digital tools can do across customer journeys, and showing and doing the data storytelling, it does more than any presentation or any memo ever could do. Prompt engineering, the reason we're focusing on that is, for me, the technology is already good enough. So long as people know how to use it, there's already a huge amount of value and productivity that can be unlocked without any major investment, because we've all got a Gemini or a Copilot or other such tools in the ecosystem. Any business can democratize AI to grow its impact in every corner of the business. And so as a CDAO, it's my mission to make everyone at the company AI literate and actually leverage the technology that's already there before we start doing then the unique and cool models beyond that. And what the tech giants can't do, they can do a lot, but what they can't do is have the domain knowledge of every business. And so it's critical that everyone, in this case within Barry Callebaut, but in any business, can have the hybrid skills of the technology, of actually being AI native and literate, but also with the business domain context as well. So understanding cocoa from the farmer to the customer, understanding the difference between what is a CPG customer, what's a big CPG customer and a small one, and then what's a gourmet client, because they all have different needs and different solutions then that we need to work with them there. So the key thing that we're focusing on is upskilling people. So the technology makes sense, and then the technology then just becomes a tool then that the people can then explore and exploit.
I really liked how you called out that as a manufacturer or as a CPG, you're not going to compete with the big tech companies. So in terms of, really understanding where you're the expert and what areas that you can actually influence and create the value, and double downing, like really focusing on that and leveraging all of this stuff that's coming to make that experience for your end customers essentially better. That's how you're going to create that value. So last question of the podcast, Dan, and it's been a wonderful conversation having you on Reimagined with AI. I want to ask you about your leadership lessons from your career, from Mondelez to Tesco Bank, and now Barry Callebaut. What's that one principle in your mind that ships value, and one lesson that you wish you learned earlier?
I might slip into a second one, but just maybe to continue the theme from the previous question is starting with the business outcomes and not the technology, I think is sort of principle 101. So those giants, the Google, Microsoft, OpenAI, they are solving the technology, and we are never going to outspend them on the technology. So if we focus on the technology and how that can serve our customers, that's going to be the key principle to go forward. But as that was a little bit the same answer as the previous one, if I may slip into maybe a second, I think the other lesson that I've learned in my 25 years of doing transformations, all transformations are people transformations. So it doesn't matter whether we call it digital or IT or AI or anything else, there's still people transformations. And until AI truly replaces us, and hopefully that never happens, but until that happens, the bottleneck is always the human capability and the culture of the organization. So the technology can scale fast, but not without people. So I think the principles are the basics. If we start with the business outcomes, if we focus on the people and culture, the technology will follow.
Amazing. And I see this consistent, with the companies that are truly making change with all of this new stuff. They're actually focusing on the people rather than the technology. You can throw billions of dollars at lots of problems, and we've seen billions of dollars sunk on lots of projects that go nowhere. But true transformation actually happens through people. So thank you for sharing that, Dan. And, it's been a pleasure having you on the show. It's been a pleasure working with you through Sigmoid. And thank you again, and would love to chat with you in the future and see where all of this stuff goes.
It's been fun. Thank you for having me. And let's not forget about people.
That was my conversation with Dan Wiseman. And if one thing is clear, AI won't save you from the basics. We talked about the real blockers to AI value, legacy approvals that should have died ages ago, data that still doesn't reconcile across functions, and transformation strategies that forget the people in the loop. Dan didn't sugarcoat it. Most companies are barely ready for basic automation, let alone agents, co-pilots, or even enterprise-scale AI. But he also laid out the path forward. Start with clean data, invest in domain-literate teams, and build systems that can actually trust at speed. If you know someone who's chasing AI outcomes but stuck in operational debt, send them this episode. And if you want more conversations like this, sharp, honest, and rooted in real-world impact, subscribe and leave us a review. Thanks for listening to Reimagined with AI. I'm Imteaz Ahmed. See you next time.